Brian, it's so great to see you here in such a better place than Somerset, New Jersey.
Yeah.
Here we are in West Yellowstone at the the Golden Stone Inn. Your friend Joe set us up here, and we came over. I mean, thank you for meeting us here, because you live over in Rexburg and we're over in Livingston. So you cut our road trip in half this morning.
Yeah. And from here down to where I live, you run the gauntlet of deer, elk, moose, bear, and I saw a dead coyote, all in that zone of narrow trees against the road. And it's a 10% chance you'll hit something.
Wow. Maybe we should have gone all the way over to your house.
I also should mention there was about 40 antelope 10 miles west of here. And I think you guys are trying to get an antelope on this trip.
Yeah. I've got an antelope tag. Yeah.
Yeah. You've had such an enormous life. You've traveled the world extensively, and we want to get into that a little bit, down the road here. And I was mentioning to you on the phone the other day, I'm from Colorado. I live on top of a mountain in Aspen. I overlook 4 ski areas. But I gotta say, I think Montana is the most beautiful state I've ever traveled through. These big valleys, and especially that low light in the evenings. It reminds me of a lot of Russell Chatham painting, where he did a lot of his landscapes from up in this region. Yeah. How did you find Rexburg?
Well, I'm basically a trout bum, and I'm going to never own a house again for the rest of my life. As we talked about earlier, I turned 70 in August, so I don't even own a paintbrush or roller. I just want to rent in trout towns and move around. So this is about my 3rd town, and I want to live cheap. I want to be close to a lot of good water. Because there's a big university, it's BYU, Idaho, in Rexburg. There's about 40,000 students. So that means 2 things. One, you can find a nice little house in the country for under $900 a month, and you will witness the worst drivers in the world. These kids are, you're in a parking lot, they're going diagonal, skidding in, driving around. It's challenging and kind of fun.
Uh-huh. How does it feel to be in, the Mormon world, where there's so many kind of like rules, if you will? Is that kind of strange for you?
Yeah, it's probably different. It's not my tribe, but all in all, I really don't care. I mean, when I say they're just people like everybody, sure. But they're very nice. I don't lock my doors. I just have to watch out for college kids driving. And so that's the least of my concern. But being 8 miles to the South Fork of the Snake and 20 minutes to the Henry's Fork and 20 minutes to the Teton, in the summer when it's light till 9:30, you're fishing dry flies for 4 hours and working a full, I work full time. And so you get the beauty of being close to a lot of good water, pretty nice, safe, pretty area. Cause, driving up here, there were the Tetons this morning, the beautiful fall colors. And so, yep, this is my trout town for now. Mm-hmm. It might be for longer. It might be, I might move to a place in Wyoming or go over to Lake Superior and do something else. But I have nothing holding me back. In fact, my neighbors have introduced me as, hey, this is Brian O'Keefe. No wife, no kids, no pets, no houseplants. So yeah, I've been mobile all my life and not tied down. And I've owned houses and properties and farms and things, and that's a responsibility. But for now, I want to do what I love to do the most, which is fish and be in cool places.
Don't lean back so much just because your cowboy hat's going to get in Brian's way just a little bit.
Oh, right. Yeah, because when we spoke on the phone, you were saying that there's so many great rivers in such a small location. Do you gravitate to one river over another?
Well, it just depends on hatches primarily. So I follow from the midges to the PMDs, salmon flies, hoppers. So I like being on water where I'm into the cycle of whatever's going on and being kind of in tune to that and not just firing off to some piece of water on a whim and hope it's good. Mm-hmm. So it's fun being intimate with water like that. And so I wouldn't necessarily run just to the South Fork or the Henry's Fork as a favorite, but each place has something going on at probably a peak time. For instance, the famous salmon fly hatch, you can find them really early on parts of the lower Henry's Fork month early before on the upper Henry Fork. And then a week later, you might be on the Teton, and the South Fork is around the 4th of July. It's a little later. So you could have, I'm going to think maybe 6 weeks of salmon fly fishing if you know where the hatch is, depending on water temperatures, elevation, that sort of thing. So yeah, it's fun being close to this much water, getting to know them, and also the people that fish them. You know, my friends that work in fly shops and that are guides. We're all talking about what's going on, and it's just a great community and a super easy place to get around. You know, these roads are great. You just zoom, take a boat, wade fish, hike into canyons. So lots to do.
It's kind of like following the tarpon migration throughout the coast of Florida with the salmon fly hatch.
But also, too, the marlin migration. Like, where are these marlin going to be? And they chase them like last year was in the Azores. Next year, it might be somewhere else where it's going off. So it's kind of interesting to see how nature moves, you know, and if you're in tune with stuff, you're always in the game.
Yeah. And if you don't live here, well, by all means, the best way to access good fishing is to go with a guide. And that would be true all over the world, whether it's fishing or hunting. But if you live here, you can, you know, drive along, go into somewhere and look at the river for a second, know what the flow is, and go, yeah, this is perfect, you know, and then maybe that evening loop back with your boat and do a nice evening float or something like that. So yeah, it's nice. But there's other towns that have great opportunities. And, you know, here I even throw in a little secret bass lake that's only 30 miles away and have, you know, some 6-pound largemouth bass on poppers. It's pretty fun.
Wow.
You know who you remind me of a little bit is Steve Rajeff. No, not Steve Rajeff. Rick Ruoff.
Oh,
He's got a small little home outside of Bozeman.
Yeah. And
he's in tune with all the different rivers. He lives very frugally, travels around to catch the great fish. Yeah. I admire people like that, like yourselves, because a lot of times people get stuck. They get weighted down with whether it be a job, marriage, too many kids, and both parents have jobs like Nikki, and they, you know, then their life of adventure is a little bit stalled out, if you will. But you never have had kids, and I have a feeling that you were really born with this free spirit to just go chase your heart.
Yeah, and you know, I didn't have a master plan when I was young, but because my grandparents were both my grandfather and grandmother were dry fly purists in Montana, and my grandfather learned fly fishing with the RAF, Royal Air Force, in England in World War I. So he learned on the chalk stream. So that's no wading, upstream dry fly only. And you know, there were no nymphs and there's no streamers allowed. So I grew up, you know, as him as my mentor, my granddad. And so I learned fly fishing kind of old school. And I think that just gave me a great appreciation for the history of the sport also. But, you know, I read a lot of the older books from Joe Brooks and all the classic writers. And it just sort of made me, you know, probably fish a little bit different than other people. You know, I'm not a numbers guy. I like the experience. And I know that's all sort of cliche, but, you know, if I can get out in the evening in these fall colors and a little hatch, I get my 8 fish. I don't need to be out there all day pounding numbers and stripping meat and doing all that stuff. I kind of like the classic stuff. And I'm sorry, I sort of forgot your first question. I rambled on there a little bit.
No, it's all good.
But so your grandfather was your first mentor fly fishing.
Yeah.
And did you have a mentor that was established in fishing already, like in the industry, that really took you under their wing? No,
not in the early days, because I started when I was 8. You know, he had a plan of teaching casting 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock on the lawn before my brother and I went to the river. And that was the big Blackfoot. So that should make you think about, like, the book River Runs Through It. And so, you know, strict granddad, casting, 2 brothers, big Blackfoot River. It was almost too weird to have all those things going on. But yeah, we were taught casting and then where trout lived. So we would take a cane pole with a live grasshopper and dap it around these, you know, seams, boulders, pockets, and these big rainbows would chase it. And then the third year, we actually fished a Joe's hopper on our bamboo rods with silk lines. And that there were some regular fly lines out there, but my granddad was a traditional guy. We would stretch those silk lines out between 2 trees and grease them up with mucilin. They almost float all day. And so, but he and my grandmother went to New Zealand in 1951 to fly fish. And that was unheard of because even a lot of people around here, didn't even know where New Zealand was. And so they spent 5 or 6 months down there. And I heard the New Zealand stories all my life. I saw some pictures, old black and white photos, my grandmother holding a big brown or something. And obviously that had to do something to me. I had to be pretty intrigued by that, going all the way around the world and all that stuff. So I took off after high school and I spent 11 months in New Zealand. So I basically fished the entire fishing season on foot with a backpack and a Fenwick fiberglass fly rod. Pfluger medalist reel, of course. That was the reel of the day. And I just backpacked, bushwhacked, got into all these rivers, basically fished every day of the season, and then bought a season's pass and skied the ski season down there too. And so at 19 years old, these sort of experiences, you realize you're probably not going to go to work in a tall building, and have a cubicle or the corporate structure. And that just sort of started the dominoes in motion of, well, I've always wanted to spend some time in Alaska. So I got a Forest Service job on the Kenai, and I fished the Kenai River and the little streams up there on my days off. And then that was like, wow, this is so cool. I got to do more of that. Not looking to make money or have a full career, but I got into guiding, and that was a way to get paid to see Alaska. Then we could fly out to all these different areas. And once you learn that, you get accustomed to, the bears and all that. Well, then you can put a family or friend trip together with a raft and float for a week. And one thing just leads to another, and it's an evolution. And pretty soon, you look at your third passport, you've had 150 out of the country fishing trips, and you're not doing too bad, because you're alive, you're eating, and you have a great friend network and guides all over the place. And so I never had a plan like, this is what I want to do. I want to be, I want to go to New Zealand. And that actually morphed into 5 months in Australia out in the outback. And then I was teaching skiing in Kashmir, India in 1974. And one thing just leads to another. So people say, oh, you've done all this amazing stuff, but it wasn't planned. I just had the opportunity to do one thing that led to another. Right. I didn't have anything holding to do another, because the forks in the road in your life are hundreds, and every branch you take, changes your life forever.
But you just followed your heart.
Yeah. Most people don't chase that branch to the end.
Yeah. Because I didn't have a big end goal. Yeah.
So let me just read off some of these destinations I found, that you've fished and photographed. Oregon, Washington, Montana, Idaho, Alaska, Mexico, Yucatan, Baja, Cuba, Bahamas, Belize, Chile, Argentina, Christmas Island, Bikini Atoll, Tonga, New Zealand, Sierra Leone, St. Brandon's Atoll, Bonefish, Tarpon Permit, trout, steelhead, salmon, roosterfish, golden dorado, mahi-mahi, barracuda, snapper, jacks, giant trevally, large and smallmouth bass, pike, sheephead, carp, bluegill, and more.
That sounds cool.
Holy cow. Driving over here today, I was telling Nikki that if you have a skiff or a flats boat, you have a job. Mm-hmm. If you have a camera, you figured out that camera paid your way.
Oh yeah. That was to get my foot in the door. Once it went from what's still to me a hobby out of control, because I don't have a business card that says photographer. I look at these other guys that do it and make a bit of a living out of it. I didn't think I could ever make a living out of it. So it was a companion hobby to fishing, to bird hunting, to all these other things, scuba diving, windsurfing. And once I got decent at it and I started to sell a few things, that was in my early 20s, I was invited to, hey, could you take pictures at my lodge in Alaska? Could you come down the Middle Fork of the Salmon on a float trip for a week and take pictures for my brochure? And back in the day, it was all print. So people wanted those big blow-ups in their booth at the shows, and then they wanted a nice brochure. The internet hadn't come along yet. But, sometimes I had to come up with airfare, and I lived very frugal. I remember the day I had $1,000 in my checking account. I was just so proud of myself. It was like, God, this is so
I
cool.
made it.
Yeah. And so I basically just traded out, fly fishing photography,
Sure.
lodge shots, food, the airplanes, whatever it was. And that got me going and to see a lot of really neat stuff. And
do you remember the first photograph you sold?
Well, I remember the first one I published. I didn't get paid for it. It was a black and white. Me, actually, I had an old man. They were all old manual cameras. I set it. I gave it to my buddy, and it was all focused. And I was holding up a brown trout, the old style, like by the gills.
The gills, yeah.
And that was just in a newsprint, black and white thing called Fishing and Hunting News. And I think when you're 18, no, I think I was 16. Just having something published is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then I kind of went through a long period where I didn't really think I was anything. So I just sort of stockpiled and switching to slides. So I sort of stockpiled my favorite pictures. And one day I was working in a fly shop in Bend, Oregon, and going to a community college there. And a writer, magazine editor walked in who I recognized. His name was Don Roberts, and he had Fly Fishing the West. It was one of the Frank Amato publications. And we were sort of chatting and stuff, and he's a super nice guy. And I said, I've been doing a little bit of photography. Would you ever want to look at it? And he goes, yeah, I'll be in tomorrow. So if it's slides, just bring them in the slide pages and we'll look at them right here. And I went, okay, great. So I brought in maybe 5 slide pages, and they hold 20 slides, and we'd Scotch tape them up to the window, and he'd be looking at them. And he said, I'd like to take some of these back to the office. And I went, oh, that's kind of neat, And so he did. And from that batch of maybe 15 slides he took, which is interesting because a lot of people would say slides he took. Well, yeah, everything was just analog. Yeah, I mean, now you do 2 touches on your computer and the picture's there in 2 seconds. And so, but I got 3 or 4 cover shots out of that batch and a few filler shots inside. That was one that kind of kicked it into gear. And I can thank Don for that. And so, like you mentioned, yeah, if you have a camera, you know how to use it. Yeah, it can open a lot of doors and get your foot in the door and make these great relationships. And, back in the day, Frontiers Travel was was the premier fly fishing travel company. And so I had enough stuff out there, and out of the blue, they contacted me to go to Christmas Island right when it opened. And, that was a big deal. It was a neat trip. And so I got to see Christmas Island just right after it opened. It was spectacular. I'd never seen giant trevally or bluefin trevally or anything like that. So just sort of one thing leads to another. And, I never had a big barricade or wall in front of me to stop doing that. I just kept letting it roll. And next thing you know, 70 years old and still having a blast and
still working for you.
It.
Do you remember when you realized that this is going to work? This photography will work.
Yeah. And I think it's just whether it's financial or emotional, because some people can't handle risk of like taking a wild flyer and doing a bunch of photography, traveling around, hope that generates enough money. But, I never had a qualm about, oh gosh, I don't have a huge bank account and all that. But, I got into repping, repped for 20 years for Patagonia, Sims, Orvis, Scientific Angler, made good money. But that's all part of the adventure too, because
you can fish while you rep.
Yeah, I fished a day, worked a day. And before cell phones and internet, I would try to work sometimes 15 to 20 days in a row, because my first territory was Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, Washington, Oregon, Alaska. Super huge. You're on the road constantly, but you're never 5 minutes from a river or lake.
Sure.
So I got to know Alaska real well because I worked down in Ketchikan all the way up to Fairbanks, out to Kodiak, and you're getting paid. Again, that's kind of the whole idea is like whether it's the camera deal or writing or being a rep, someone's paying you to do it.
Sure.
And if you can, do a good job and they get what they want, you get what you want. Well, I did the rep thing for 20 years, and that's kind of where I met you at the shows and trade shows and things like that, and then so many other amazing people in the sport. And but I always had sort of a bit of a calculated plan. I never was unemployed. I always had jobs, but they gave me freedom. and, working 20 days in a row, taking 10 days off every month. So every month I did a trip to Belize or Bahamas or somewhere. And, things were pretty cheap. When I first went to Belize in the early 80s, you could get a nice little cabana on the beach, perfectly comfortable place for $15 a day. Even up in San Pedro, you could get a hotel for $17 a day. There were only a couple guides, literally 2 guides of the whole country. So I fished with lobster fishermen and conch divers and stuff. And I would just pay them $50 for gas. They dropped me off on flats with tailing permit. I caught my first tarpon from wading, and so,
wow.
Those were pretty cool days, fishing in Punta Gorda. There were no Garbett brothers back then. You just had to get a 55-gallon drum of gas in Placencia and then go all the way down, camping your way down to get to those beautiful flats in Punta Gorda and going up some of those rivers for snook.
Wow.
And now, of course, there's guides everywhere. And I'm not one of those grumpy old men, get off my lawn guys I was lucky to be born in 1954 and you were in 53.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we grew up when there was still a lot of wild lands, but there was great transportation. Jet travel and,
inexpensive,
pretty safe, and so, but we could still go to places like Tonga and Christmas Island and the Bikini Atoll and places like that and be one of the first people there. Cause I think when I was just goofing off in Venezuela with a friend of mine who spoke great Spanish, we ended up in Los Roques because I took black and white pictures of snook, tarpon, bonefish, and permit. And I would go to fish markets and stuff and show people. And a couple of them would say, "Oh, Los Roques, man. Yeah, Los Roques, what's that?" So it's a national park. We chartered a plane out there, landed, no guides, no lodging. But the pilot took us through town and found us a little house to rent and a kid that would come along with us with a little boat. And the family that owned that little cabin house thing, it was just a cinder block, like a jail cell. And so Pete and I stayed in Los Roques catching bonefish and bonita, and there's little tarpon in the bay. And then we got fed lobster for a week.
The food there is just incredible.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And the shrimp or prawns or something unbelievable.
It's really one of the great places Nikki and I've ever been to.
Yeah. And so that week, 2 guys drinking those Pilar beers, $350 for 2 with a
it's
kid.
It's cheaper to be on the road.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And that was just sort of one of those things of being available for an opportunity. We just were winging it. We had a rental car driving around Venezuela back when it wasn't as dicey as it is now, but it was still, there was a little bit of an angry element to the whole, the people down there and all. But anyway, one of those things, it's just one thing leads to another. And,
what, did you have any other photographers that you aspired, that you emulated or got any sort of, the word is inspiration from, I guess, from Val Atkins. Yeah. I know Kathy Beck and her husband traveled and did a lot of photography as well. Atkinson's. What makes a great photograph, aside from any of those guys inspiring you to be
and you nailed it too. Val Atkinson, one of the best, and I met him. You'll find out. I'll branch off a question 100 different times, but hopefully I'll circle back.
No, we love it.
No, we're good. No.
So I'm guiding in Alaska. I've sold 3 or 4 cover shots, and I'm 28 or 29 years old. And in walks Valentine Atkinson into the lodge, and he's up there to shoot something for a magazine or something. And so I got to fish with him on the Brooks River. We went all over the place. He got these neat bear shots. I had a hat kind of like yours, and I'm fishing, and right behind me is a giant Kodiak bear. A big Alaska brown bear, and he got some great stuff. And I just had a blast with him because I didn't want to, mooch in on him and say, hey, I take a few pictures too. It was better for me to just watch him, learn from him. And besides being just a great photographer, Valentine's just a great guy. So it's fun to hang with. And so I try to see him whenever I can when I'm down in California. But anyway, so what makes a great photo? Now I'm what I call an editorial photographer, meaning what you see is what you get. I don't dress people up in the finest new clothes that all matches. I think that looks really fake. I don't have a lot of gear. I don't have a good expensive gear. I have pretty basic stuff. And right now my iPhone 15 is the best camera I've ever owned. And I use an iPhone 12 in a little underwater housing and get really pretty underwater shots. And so I'm probably 85% iPhone now. But in the day, especially in the film, you had the lenses of all sizes, flash, and you were truly a photographer. You had to think about every photo and do adjustments and all that. And then when the more modern cameras came out with autofocus and you can put it on A for everything automatic and you got great stuff. It was pretty easy, but still you were lugging around all that stuff. Today in the digital era, it's just a lot easier and you can just blaze and delete and get what you want, hopefully. But for me as an editorial photographer, meaning that means I grew up doing magazine assignments for Field and Stream and places like that where you can't fake it. You can't add stuff in Photoshop, a sunset that didn't exist. They wanted really nuts and bolts. What you see is what you get stuff. And I think of myself as doing kind of day in the life thing. So day in the life, that would be, the travel that you do to get to a spot, whether it's broken down trucks or boats or whatever. The weather. So people see it and they would say, oh yeah, it looks like I would wear this, or the terrain, how physical is it to hike these rivers? And so I provided information in my pictures. I had a lot of insects with a natural insect with artificial fly side by side. I like being a purveyor of information, not just a one-of-a-kind beauty shot, which are cool. I just don't really have the time to do those. Those take a lot of setup, waiting for the light just right, and having maybe a large format camera that's way out of my budget. But I love looking at, these beautiful landscape photos that are in houses and things. But no, I just did what you see is what you get in beautiful places because like New Zealand, it's pretty hard to take a bad photo. It's hard to take a bad photo in Cuba or the Bahamas. And so I went to these wonderful places, had a nice assignment to just go with these guides, fish, tell it like it is. And that's the difference between, like me, editorial against commercial photography, where you do wackadoodle Photoshop and make everything great, like an ad for a cruise line. You'd have a jet ski and a palm tree and a margarita all in the same picture. And then fine art photography was what I was alluding to, like giant blow-ups you see in beautiful houses and banks. I just didn't have the equipment to do that, or the time or the desire, really. So I like to just share what you see is what you get kind of stuff. And that's still what I do.
Was there a learning curve in capturing a great photograph, or were you sort of had a natural eye?
That is a great question because my mother taught art at the University of Washington and was a well-known artist in her own right. And as a kid, I say I was drug around to all these galleries and art shows and museums and things, but actually I kind of enjoyed it. I think I appreciated what my mother did with her art and making a living at it. And then I would go to these shows and look at all this interesting art and the interesting people that did the art. Like the picture behind me, that beautiful artwork. She's down in Bozeman. It's just nice to know people and see what they do. So I think all those museum and art gallery trips paid off because I probably developed a little bit of sense of, for an easy word would be composition, lighting and that sort of thing. Well, then, I started out with a little Kodak Instamatic. Do you remember those where you put that little cartridge of film in there and you wound it and it was the first point and shoot camera. And I had that for a while. And then my mother said one thing. She saw some of the prints. It was all prints. And she goes, well, those are kind of professional. And I might have been in the 4th grade at the time. So I thought, wow, that's a pretty cool compliment from a college art teacher. And so I continued to use that camera, but then I had bought $100, single reflex camera, film camera, and used that for a long time, upgraded to a $250 camera. But yeah, I think it was having my mother take me to all those places and giving me positive feedback. And then, my brother or my mom would show some people some pictures when they came over to the house. And when you live in the shadow of your big brother, who's, the best student and great ski racer and all this stuff, and you live in his shadow, and he finally starts showing your pictures to people that are coming over to the house, it's the first time I realized as a human being I actually existed. Because to my brother, I was just a nuisance, a pest, and I think he said, all you do is suck oxygen out of this house. And I did more than that. I had to mow the lawn, but yeah, that was neat. It was nice having a little, credit for it. And as a little kid, those little things go a long ways.
Mm-hmm. Did you you took that famous jet ski photo, didn't you? That is the best photo of all time.
Best fishing photograph of all time. There's no fish involved.
Well, it's so popular. It has a cult following.
Yeah.
And I was working at a fly fishing show in the Seattle area. And speaking of the University of Washington, guy comes by the booth, sees my little name tag and goes, "Oh, Brian O'Keefe, you took the jet ski photo." I went, "Yeah, I know. That was so much fun." And he goes, "Well, I teach advertising at the University of Washington, and I use that picture in my lectures and stuff as,
an example
of something. I don't know what, but
you were selling something with that photograph big time.
Yeah. It was Scott Rods who did it. So Jim Barchi and some other guys.
The strength of the rod, and also too, how much we all hate jet skis when we're on the flat. Yeah. So you had two things going on there.
Yeah. And it was a political photo. The rods are great and all that stuff, but we hated jet skis. And so we got a guide, and my sales manager was the guy that kept jumping off the jet ski. And the guy on the boat would set the hook. We did it over and over. And he was just beat up. He was going 25 miles an hour and jumping in the air and splashing. And then I would say, one more. And he'd just look at me, "You got this shot. You're just doing this."
Mess with me.
Yeah. Did a little bit. But a great group of guys. We stayed at the Golden Grouper. Do you remember the Golden Grouper in either in Almirada old fishing bum hangout, $60 rooms. We crammed 5 guys in there. It was just a blast. And that's an iconic photo now.
So did you go to Jim? You had this idea. This is all you?
Was it your idea to take this photograph?
We would go to rep meetings and talk about everything from marketing to, colors of blanks and different things. And so we were kicking around ideas for ads and posters. And I think I offered 3 ideas, and we did 2 of them. And then we used Val Atkinson's shot. Remember that Cessna airplane that was in the water and it was a caster on the wing? So we did these a little bit different. At the day, they were sort of edgy, but they were fun. It was just really cool.
What did Jim say when you pitched him the idea of the jet skier photo?
Was he all over it? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because
Archie's a good dude, man.
He hangs out in the Keys, and he might even have a boat down there.
He's got a boat. He's got a super skiff.
Yeah.
Fishes out of Sugarloaf.
Yeah, so that was an easy sell.
What do you get a big rush when you see a photograph that really is a stunning photograph, like a stunning fish?
Oh yeah, I still love a good fishing culture photo. And I do this on my own thing on Instagram. If I see a shot that's super cool, I'll go in the comments. I may not know who took it, and I'll just say top 10 photo on Instagram this year. And that's all I say. And it's been a photographer in Sweden with these monster pike, but his lighting is amazing. And every once in a while, someone will get maybe an incredible jump shot or a good underwater shot. And I just say top 10 Instagram photo this year. This is my little thing, my little stamp. And I also might say, gosh, I wish I took that photo. I would love to own that photo.
Right.
There's some really good stuff out there.
Neil Rogers was a great saltwater tarpon photographer. And also, let's not forget Pat Ford.
Yeah. Yeah. And then even going back in the early days, Michael Fong in the Bay Area, he was a great angler, came up into this area a lot in the Henry's Fork, and he shot for Fly Fisherman. And that was the thing. If you could get into Fly Fisherman magazine, you've really made it,
Made it.
And I'll just give you I'll brag for just 1 second. So the current issue of Fly Fisherman, they do a newsstand copy cover, same issue, but they also have a subscriber cover. And it comes out this time of the year with their annual Destinations issue. And I just got word that I've got the cover on both of the newsstand and subscriber covers and the destinations cover. So that's sort of a trifecta in photography to get all three is pretty cool. And
very cool.
Then, it was Huey Lewis who said, I've worked 40 years to be an overnight sensation. And that's kind of what you can do in things like photography, where it doesn't matter if you're 22 or 82, everyone's an equal, and so it's kind of neat to be doing this
to dominate,
for 50 some years and then do something like this, which is like, yeah, that is so cool.
Yeah. Well, let me give your photography resume. You've been a contributor photographically for Field and Stream Magazine, USA Today, the Drake Magazine, Outside Magazine, American Angler Magazine, Orvis, Patagonia, Fly Fisherman Magazine, Outdoor Life Magazine, Catch Magazine, which you started with your pal, Fly Rod and Reel Magazine, Northwest Fly Fishing Magazine, Voyage de Pesca Magazine, Oregon Tourism, Chile Tourism. You could go on and on.
Playboy.
No, but I had we have a skiing thing. You were obviously world-class Olympic racer and stuff, and I did the racing thing, and then I just like to ski bumps and powder, and I worked in all these different skiers.
You were on the cover of Powder Magazine, upside down.
Yeah, that was fun. We got kicked out of Crater Lake National Park because they had this cornice there, and if you pulled off a nice big backflip, stuck it, and stopped, all good. But if you didn't, you would go all the way into the lake. 20 degrees air temperature wouldn't be too good. But anyway, so my friend Mike Epstein was a photographer, and I was kind of a ski guy. We just went all over the place, Taos, New Mexico, and Jackson Hole, Grand Targhee. And he did a lot of the photos for their trail maps and their marketing department. And that was his gig. And I was not bored with skiing, but if Mike wanted to take me at all these places, yeah, I'd do his skiing stuff for him. But Playboy bought one of his photos, and I think they did a calendar or something. I probably have it in my storage unit or something, but it was a shot of me. I think it might have been that upside down red jumpsuit.
It was famous.
Shot. Yeah.
Well before I ever met you, I remember seeing that.
Yeah.
That cover shot.
So I do have a connection to Playboy. So there you go. But also, remember, National Enquirer, it's still around, right? In the news, the checkout aisle. So they bought a couple of his shots, and I would say, hey, look, I'm right next to Valerie Bertinelli or some person of the era, and that's fun. That's really fun stuff.
Out of all the years, do you have one photo that stands out that you're most proud of, or a favorite photo?
Yeah, you got it right there. That underwater permit from Turner Flats. That was film. But it was oceanside flat, so that meant on that incoming tide, the water was so clear. And got a nice permit. The guide had yellow shorts, which kind of matched that little yellow marking on the permit. And he was barefoot. And as it was being revived to be released, I had a Nikonos, dive camera. Back in the day, that's all you used was the Nikonos 5. It was top of the line. And a wide angle lens. Oh no, I had a fisheye lens on it. And I just kind of walked. And, back in the day, you had to set your focus in feet and inches. There wasn't just any, thing bouncing.
So if your subject was 10 inches away, you'd set it for 10.
Yeah, you had to, I think it'd be 18 inches minimum. But anyway, I think I set it for 3.5 feet or something. And I just kind of did a walk around the fish. The fish is just in the water like it is in that photo you have. And I just kind of went headshots, 45-degree, flat-sided. I just walked around, did about 4 shots. 4 shots, not 40 or 100, 4 shots. And one of them just was perfect. And I have a theory that if you hold your camera lens at the fish's eye level, you almost always get anatomically perfect fish, not too much belly, not too much back. It's just a standard, whether it's a steelhead, a permit, or anything. And so I kept the camera at, you're not down there underwater, swimming with it. It's just held underwater. And I got about eye level and just click, click, click. And, back then, if you bought the best film and say it's Fuji Velvia or something, it was kind of expensive, around $8 a roll. And then I had to ship my film once I got home from a big trip. If it went through all the x-ray machines okay and all that, I'd ship it to San Francisco to a really good lab. So there's the shipping costs and then the lab costs. You get it back. Sometimes pictures were around 80 cents a click. And, you know,
being a frugal guy that you are.
I mean, yeah, I didn't take a lot. I didn't blaze. People say, oh, do you like to blaze? Take it one good one? I go, not really. I kind of like to see what I want. And I think I can kind of get what I want in just a picture or two. And so, yeah, now today with our phones, a kid from birth to age 10 is probably going to have 20,000 photos of them. You know, so you
also by doing it that way, it makes you a better photographer, I think, because you're looking for that subject, the content, and all the things that you want out of the photograph before you pull that trigger.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I was going to ask too. So when you go on a trip, you have in mind what you are looking to get and not hoping to get.
Yeah. Oh, you have a mental shot list, and sometimes a magazine or like people I work for now, they'll make a little wish list, a shot list, and that's kind of handy to have because you don't want to come back home and go, oh, shoot, I forgot something, you know. But now I don't want to say it's formula because that's too limiting, but I'm pretty good at getting that day in the life of and not missing a key component. I've been doing it long enough now, but what's interesting is I'll go to a lodge somewhere and it's a beautiful sunny day and I'm just running around like a madman. It's sunny, you know, I'm going to do lodge exteriors, you know, just some neat stuff. And someone will say, Brian, are you going to be like this all week? Are you going to sit down, you know, have a rum and coke with us or not? I go, well, we're here for a week. It's sunny today. We can have 6 days of rain because you learn the hard way where you might get there and you get that welcoming drink at Casablanca and you sit down and you're having a blast. And then you don't even get out of your room for a week because I was there once when it was such a big storm. The sand built up against my door. And I couldn't open my door to get out. You know, so but if you see me running around like a maniac on the first day, it's because I can get 60% of my lodge shots done right then and then. And then you feel pretty good that burden is lifted off you. And now we just have to get some fish.
Those little windows are very important and very valuable. And if you get lazy, you miss that. It's almost like the fishing is going to be really good when all the guides leave the water. It's going to get really good between 6 and 7 tonight. Yeah. 5:30 to 6. Tide's going to be right. You got to be there.
Yeah.
You know, otherwise you miss that shot.
Yeah.
I think you were possibly one of the original Instagrammer photographers, you know, to show what you caught via your camera for proof. And now today you see everybody, you know, posting all this stuff that they're catching. Yeah. Tell me about those early years and why you picked up that camera initially.
Well, I'll try to keep this brief because I can do the long version or the short version. I'll try to do the short version. In about the 3rd or 4th or 5th grade, somewhere in there, I would ride my Stingray bike from my house down to Lake Washington. We lived in Bellevue in Kirkland, Washington. And there was actually very good bass fishing. And you wouldn't think Washington State is a big bass state, but every state has some good bass fishing. And so I would go down there and I sometimes fly fish, but I mostly used my Ambassador 5000 on a Shakespeare Wonder Rod. And I'd cast plugs around the pilings around apartments, around these rockeries that they built for, you know, basically a break so they could flatten it out and put houses on them. But those big boulders held bass. There was crawfish in them. And I would catch these big bass and let them go. Ride home, my mom and my brother would say, hey, how'd you do? I go, well, I got 3 or 4 pretty big ones. And I think they were kind of winking at each other like, yeah, right. And so as a kid, you know, you fib a little bit. If you broke something, you know, you didn't do it. And, you know, maybe the dog did. And I think they kind of conspired and were worried that I might have a problem with the truth. Like I was lying to them about what I caught and stuff. Because they caught me in a couple fibs. All kids fib. And that's how I got that Kodak Instamatic for Christmas. Now take a picture of your fish and let's see them, you know. And so I didn't know that maybe they were trying to trick me a little bit. Well, it was December 25th, and a camera like that, it goes in your sock drawer, and you wait till April or May when the bass bite's on, and So I had a little canvas creel over my shoulder with stuff in it. I put the camera in there and I'd ride my bike down to the lake and catch a bass. And like everybody does, the first time they take a picture, they lay it down on the ground and then, shoot down at it with the rod laying against it. And eventually I used up my cassette of film and I just announced to them maybe in June or something. I said, hey, I shot up my roll of film. And I remember my brother saying, well, what are you taking pictures of? Playing basketball or something? I go, well, no, I've been fishing and stuff. Well, then you would drive to a little place like Photomat or any sort of 24-hour photo developing, and you get your big glossy prints the next day. Drop the film off, picked them up, sort of shared them in the car, and my mom and my brother like, wow, this is amazing. This is cool. I'm sort of like, yeah, I know, whatever. So I've sort of proved them wrong. But again, that was when my brother started showing pictures to friends or neighbors that came over. And that's how it all started, because I got some initial, gratification out of it. And so one thing just sort of led to another. And I never took a real class, but I sort of started looking at photography a little different in magazines, what I liked. And we all do that now. We all have style, and style is, really what color your socks are, how you comb your hair. And I mean, style isn't right or wrong. I liked bright, colorful shots. I wasn't doing a lot of dark, edgy stuff that looked like fishing was uncomfortable, cold, which it is at times. But I love the big white puffy clouds, the blue sky, and interesting trees and rivers with blue in them and beautiful fish. And so I just sort of developed a style, and people say, oh, I can tell when it's your picture when I open the magazine. And I kind of hate it because I don't want to be too redundant or predictable. But I guess when I go fishing, I love those puffy white clouds and a beautiful day and nice water. So,
but it's the same thing. It's like when you see a Clyde Butcher photograph, it's a Clyde Butcher.
Yeah.
Or an Ansel Adams or whatever.
I follow
So
Clyde.
you got to be prideful with all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah.
What do you think about Instagram in the photography industry?
Oh, I think I'm like a lot of people who have a love-hate relationship with social media. Personally, if it wasn't sort of work-related, I wouldn't probably do it. There's just a lot of junk on it, and there's a lot of abuse of fish and using fish as a prop for holding up a big reel or doing something where the fish just isn't the fish. We should honor the fish we catch. We keep them wet and handle them properly. But when I see poor fish handling and catching fish for a alternative motive of see me and getting likes on Instagram, that's when I don't like social media. But done properly, it's pretty amazing because I can see what you guys do, and I can see Clyde, and I can see all these other friends of mine. It's fun, nice way to do it. If I wasn't, the job that I have now, working for 11 Angling, if I didn't have that, where we have to, show what we do, and it's just normal. And I like to throw out some kind of goofy stuff on Instagram. Like I have this thing about double yolk eggs. I can tell when one's a double yolk.
Oh, really?
So I'll get a Sharpie and I'll put a 2 on it, take a picture of it with the frying pan, and then crack it. And so some of that stuff on Instagram to me is fun because it shows you like you're a normal person. You have a sense of humor. You're not all caught up in this wild world. So I think the good outweighs the bad, but we've all seen stuff on Instagram that's like pretty icky.
Right. Yeah. But I was just kind of asking you more in the view of if you're someone trying to have a career, make a career or business out of fishing photography, was Instagram kind of like the beginning of the downfall of making a career being a professional photographer? Because now everyone's a professional, if you will.
Yeah, it had a huge influence. And part of it, say during the film era, you got paid a little bit, not too bad. A cover on Field and Stream was sort of the ultimate because you could make as much as $2,500. There's really not much money in fly fishing photography. It's such a niche little thing. Hunting and other sports have way bigger followings, tons more money in it. But by everybody having a camera, being a phone or digital camera, well, it watered down the inventory in the market. And so prices came down. So today getting a picture published would be about the same as the 1980s or even the 70s.
Wow. Is that right?
Yeah. So it went up and up and up and up because very few people did it. It was supply and demand. And now it's come way, way down to even being free with a lot of places. So, yeah, I had a big influence on that. Digital basically did it first, anything digital. And then, of course, Facebook and then Instagram. But, the benefit is it used to be you only saw someone's work when it was published. And there's 5 or 6 magazines that you would see it in. You wouldn't see everybody. You would just see a few people, and that's pretty cool. And now you can see photographers in Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Asia, all over, and see what they're doing on a weekly, monthly basis. And I think that's really fun. That's really cool to see because you see people evolve. They get better and better. You should get better and better, like most things, until physically you can't, like ski racing or something. But photography, you should be getting better and better your whole life. And it's fun to watch people just break into it, start doing some really neat stuff, their own stuff that hasn't been done, and watch them get better and better. And so I guess I like half of what social media does.
Is there a photograph that you haven't captured yet that you're trying to find? Is there one in particular, possibly in a certain location with a certain fish or whatever it might be, that in the back of your mind you'd really like to go get that?
That's good. Nothing comes to mind right off the bat, but I'll tell you categories that I'd like to do better at. One is humor. Humor in fishing is really difficult. Every once in a while, for instance, my buddy John came across this huge pile of brown bear poop, and he was kneeling down to take a picture of this bear poop, and his back foot snapped his rod. So I've got his foot, the broken rod, and him taking pictures. Now that's perfect. That's a good little bit of humor. But
right.
Humor, you know how much fun we have when we fish. We're always cracking jokes and playing tricks on people or whatever. But it's hard to take a picture of that. It's spur of the moment. So humor in fly fishing is a great category to work on. The other one is mood. And mood is generally the lighting, people's body language. And I have a picture of Ross Purnell, a fly fisherman, last day in Tierra del Fuego, walking kind of like this with his spay rod, just pooped out and tired, fishing all day. And then it's just this low light and kind of silky clouds and the river in front of him. And he's just walking in slow. And that creates a real interesting mood. You can look at it and you say, oh yeah, end of the day, tired, still one more pool, you know? And so mood is a great category and humor is a great category. And
what about women with fish?
Yeah. I mean, I think we should take pictures of all people.
Yeah, what do you mean by that?
Well, you see a lot of photographs in magazines now, like Florida Sportsman, where you have women in bikinis holding a big Dorado, or that sort of a thing where the sexuality comes into a photograph. Yeah. You see it a lot with certain magazines on the.
Are you saying that's like cheap, like a?
I don't know if it demeans the photograph because the woman's in a bikini,
right?
But you see it all the time.
If that's how people fish in Florida, that's probably not that big a deal. If you're sexualizing your photo, is that a word, Nick? Sexualizing?
I'm sure it is.
Something like that. Anyway,
you don't see that on the Madison River.
No, it would be incongruent. It wouldn't be right. It would be sort of weird, and I think that's been abused a little bit on the Instagrams and stuff for self-promotion. I mean, it's just one click away from scrolling, just get it out of my face.
Yeah, right.
I think it's a cheap shot. And the women anglers I know would never do that. They would just say, no, that's not what I do. I wear good. I mean, there's bugs. I got this on. I got these for walking through the brambles. And they wouldn't even give it a second thought. This is how we do it here. But what they want to do in Florida is their own business. But
right.
I think it's a little odd when it's overdone.
Yeah. If you don't mind, I'd like to go back in your life briefly to, you were a skier. Your brother was a racer. You were a patrolman, if I'm not mistaken. I'm surprised because a lot of times people get stuck in whatever they do. As a patrolman, they've been there for 50 years.
Yeah.
Ski racing, after your career, you're still part of the ski racing community in one way or the other. Did you almost get stuck in the ski world?
Well, a little bit, but I had such a fly fishing influence in my life, I could do what people call now living the dream. And when you do something like ski instruction or ski patrolling and guiding in the summer, you have this community around you of like patrolman would be like being on a fire crew or firefighting, firemen, policemen, baseball team. And that camaraderie is addictive. And you have a bunch of buddies. There's a lot of beer. There's a lot of fun. It's some serious work because I threw bombs for avalanches and stuff. So I would go out with a 50-pound pack of dynamite, get paid $4 an hour, turn on the chairlift, pitch black, ride it up into avalanche-prone territory. And then with your, colleagues all sort of risking your life and throw these huge bombs and make the slides for $4 an hour.
How much fun was that?
It was a blast.
That's one of the best parts of the job, right?
I know. The bigger boom, the better. And, we would tape these, there were bombs. They were like a little stick of dynamite. That's a big firecracker. We'd have these big bombs and we would tape 3 of them together because the bigger the noise,
the concussion.
Bigger, you need that ground to shake.
More thrill.
Yeah. And we had a thing because we were on Forest Service and a lot of ski areas are on Forest Service property. There's no such thing as a dead. You throw that big bomb out there and you wait and you cover your ears and then, it didn't go off. You have to go retrieve it. You can't leave it out there. So say I threw it. We wait. Then we wait a little more just to be super okay with it. Well, it's time to go out. Now you're on a slope.
We'll find it next summer.
Yeah. And you might even be roped up to go get it. But you know what? Tied to a tree or something, 3 guys go out to get it. Your buddies wouldn't send you out alone to do it. So it's kind of neat.
Right.
Builds a lot of
trust in each other.
What if you threw another bomb out there?
Well,
wouldn't it spark the other?
It might, but there's just rules, So,
yeah.
But that's the sort
Great
of thing
idea.
you get addicted to those friendships of, say, ski patrolling, and then when you're guiding, you have a whole nother community over here, and that mojo is good. It's super fun, and you want it to go forever, and that's why you'll see 55-year-old ski patrolmen and guides shoveling water and the gnarliest hands in the world. Guys around here have been guiding for 50 years. And so I made a deal with myself that I would quit guiding and patrolling on my 30th birthday. So I was in Alaska. August 18th rolls around. I'd already told the owner of the lodge, I'm done on my birthday. I'm going to go move on to something new. And as luck would have it, I had guided Dennis Black. And if people don't know the name Dennis Black, they know his products. He started Umpqua. And back in the day, it was Umpqua Feather Merchants. And he came up as a single, and I guided him for a week. And I knew him even on the North Umpqua because I ran into him fishing. So it was kind of fun to see him. And then when I quit, he was the first call I made. I said, "Hey, Dennis, I'm going to quit guiding and stuff. I want to get a different kind of job." And he says, "Oh, perfect timing. I need a rep. I need a rep to do this." So he had a Colorado rep. I became his Northwest and Alaska rep. And the rest was sort of history. From that, I became the first Orvis rep in the Northwest and Alaska. And back then there was no Sims waders. I got a job with Sims when it was neoprene waders, and John Sims owned the company. But what a great deal, without knowing what a rep does. I was given order forms, warranty, catalogs, etc., and just hit the road with, some different products from all these companies and just winged it. And just eventually you develop a style, and there's there's some aggressive salesmen. There's some people that want to be your buddy. And I think I was sort of in the middle. I never badmouthed other products. I worked hard. And so that's how I morphed out of that living the dream to like the next version of living the dream. Now I had a big van, and back in the day it had Orvis or Scott rods on it, kind of early on in the rep van era. And I had a little camper van, so I could, I'd come to West Yellowstone, work with 2 or 3 fly shops. Then I'd be on the Madison or, on Hebgen Lake. And I traveled with skis, golf clubs, and fishing gear, and maybe a little bar. But,
so it's not just trout bum, ski bum, trout bum,
golf bum.
I know you've had an enormous life ski instructing in Kashmir, getting attacked by lepers.
You know that one, huh?
It's just when those kind of stories get around. Mm-hmm. Run us through that period briefly before we get to the Catch magazine and now working with 11 and other fishing destinations. How did you end up in Kashmir and getting attacked by lepers?
Well, this again is a long story, but I'll keep it brief. So I spent that winter skiing in New Zealand, and there was a little international community at Cornet Peak in Queenstown. There was some Scandinavian guys skiing. There was a woman from Canada. There was a couple Australians, a couple Kiwis actually in our little ski group. And we skied every day. And so one of the Americans that was down there was from Colorado, and he had a job that was through the United Nations. He had different connections than I did. I was just a kid. And he was going to be the first ski instructor in Kashmir, India. They had a chairlift and these rope tows and amazing mountains. Mm-hmm. And the base was at 10,000. So pretty nice. Now it's a great, huge gondola ski area called Gulmarg. And so John and I became buddies, and we were roommates. And then I don't want to get too off the subject, but I got kicked out of New Zealand because I overstayed my visa. And as a young person, I didn't know if that was that big of a deal. But when you go to New Zealand before computers and stuff, they wrote your name and passport number and the day you came in, and you have a 3-month visa, and they write that all down. Well, when I was in more civilized spots in New Zealand, I extended my visa to 6 months. But then I was in the boonies and just hiking all the trails and fishing and then skiing. I just kind of forgot about it. Well, someone sees that I'm here for 6 months, but they don't see the next line about when I left. So they probably put a word out like, hey, there's this American guy and he's overstayed his visa. Keep your eyes out for him. Well, one day I was in a pub, and someone heard my accent. They said, are you American, Canadian? Because a lot of people like to do that. Are you English or Australian? And I said, I'm from the U.S. And they go, can I see your passport? I don't have it on me. He said, well, let's go get it.
Oh, no.
It was an off-duty policeman. And so we go over to my little cabin. I show it to him, and he goes, you want to do this the easy way or the hard way? I'm thinking, because the hard way was headlock and into my car and into jail. Or the easy way is I'll trust you that you'll be here packed up at 7:00 in the morning tomorrow. And I'm going to give you a ride to the airport in Christchurch and you're out of here.
Wow.
I said, I'll do the easy way. And so my friend John from Colorado that I was skiing with, he was like, well, I'm kind of ready to hit the road too because I got to get up to India. And so he met me in Melbourne. And because all criminals end up in Australia, right? And so we bought an old Volkswagen and drove it from Melbourne to Perth. So it'd be like going from Seattle to Chicago on dirt roads. So tons of adventures, crazy stuff. And then we got jobs out in the outback because we had to kind of get some money. And I got a job in an iron ore foundry, making all these different steels and titaniums and stuff. And John got something in a brick making factory, and he had an accident and broke his hand or his wrist. And he said, Brian, here's the deal. I'm going to India to teach skiing at this little place called Gulmarg. And I'll tell you how to get there. And I'm thinking, if you want to go, you just be me. They don't know me. So you just show up. And so I went, that sounds cool.
We're about the same height. It's all good.
Yeah. And so, I finished my job there in Australia. And I wanted to see the island of Komodo, which has the Komodo dragon, the giant monitor lizards in Indonesia. But when I was in Jakarta, I was just walking around town a little bit, and I wandered a few streets back of the main commerce zone, and it was getting kind of shaky, but those are cool places, Well, until I came around a corner and these 7 or 8 guys sort of converged on me, just wearing rags and blankets with holes cut in them. And they were grabbing at my pack. Now, my pack was huge, and I had skis on one side, fly rod tube on the other, and then everything I needed to go to teach skiing in India. And I'm pushing and I'm shoving, and pretty soon it was getting a little bit overwhelming. And so I took my Fenwick case out, and back then they were a triangular plastic They're pretty
Tubes.
rigid. And
Yep.
by being triangular, they were harder to bend than fold. Round would bend. And so this was a pretty stout case. Well, I'm not proud of beating up a bunch of guys with leprosy, but I had to take a couple good solid whacks at them and a couple body blows and a couple stabs and push them back. Because
Scary stuff.
Yeah. And then I didn't really, I felt sorry for him. I mean, if I had leprosy, I'd probably try to jump a guy that's got a nice jacket, and steal it, but I had to kind of Indiana Jones these guys a couple times and beat them back. And then I got the heck out of there. And actually I got out to a main part of downtown and I saw the Pan Am Airlines sign on a building. And I just beeline for that sign. And I walked in and that air conditioning hit me after, 95 degrees, 100% humidity, drenched in sweat. I hit that air condition hits me and someone in the office desk says, "Hey, how can we help you?" And I'm flying Pan Am at that time. I said, "I'm kind of interested in your next flight to," well, actually it was going to be Bangkok. So I went Bangkok, Hong Kong, New Delhi, something like that.
What'd they look like, the leopards? What did their faces look like?
Oh,
Did
terrible,
you notice them?
horrible. Yeah, it's real scabby, bleeding and missing things. And
Oh, God,
yeah, it was not good.
Yeah.
And so.
And you were just opening up new scabs.
Yeah. Hopefully that's all. And, I was in that Pan Am office. They said, "Well, sit down. We can help you. Would you like a cold beer?" That was San Miguel. I think that's from the Philippines or something.
This is 30 minutes after you got beat up by a bunch of lepers.
And so I had that cold beer in the air conditioning. And then I just continued on my way. And I stayed at the YMCA in Hong Kong for a while and just worked my way, got up to New Delhi, got on a train, then bus, then taxi. Then it was about a full day of hiking to get to that little ski area. And so I showed up and met the people and sort of pretended to be who they had planned, because they had the ski area and they had a community there of these world-class climbing guides above Sherpa. Sherpa are workers. They make everything happen. But then there's the guides who kind of run the show and get people to on top of Everest, on Annapurna, on these other mountains in Pakistan and India, Nepal. And so my job was to teach these climbing guides how to ski so they could be the ski school the next year.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And so I was just an employee. I think I made roughly 25 cents a day, but I got room and board. I ate what they ate, except I got sick. They didn't. There was no hygiene. It was, my toilet bowl froze solid. My shower had an icicle from the shower head to the bottom of the shower. And so it was tough to stay, washed. And my toothpaste froze into just a chalky substance. And I ran out of razor blades thinking, I'll just get more. Well, no, there was no razor blades. So I had the scruffy beard getting going, and it was pretty wild. I lost 30 some pounds because I got a little bit of rice and veggie thing at night, and I got goat yogurt in the morning and sometimes a fried egg. And
what was the good part of all this?
Well, I was skiing in the Himalayas, and just unbelievable adventures with everything from avalanches, and there was a war going on with Pakistan. It's always been a border dispute. And so there'd be some low flying jets and there'd be some riots in a town. And
were you ever apprehensive, fearful of your life in any way other than the lepers?
No, not really, but mainly because I think I was just young and naive.
Was the skiing that good that you wanted to stay?
The experience was that good. The chairlift would be very intermediate by today's standards and not very long. But it was fun teaching those guys how to ski. I built a couple big jumps and had some fun with it. But yeah, the experience was unbelievable. I don't think you could do it again because now it's a famous big ski area. And but back in the day, it was just beginning to be what it is. And it was fun being there.
What's kind of interesting when you're speaking about all your adventures and your travels is that if you take a look at fly fishing as a whole, especially saltwater fly fishing now, it was pretty much tarpon fishing, and that was pretty much started getting popular in the early 70s, late 60s. So it's a relatively new sport, whereas, freshwater fly fishing goes on and on for centuries.
Yeah.
but a lot of the things that you did internationally fly fishing many, many years ago was outstanding fishing. So there's two things that I want to talk about, this next little phase is that how you started Catch Magazine and why, and now you're working with the company 11 that has all these motherships and lodges all around the world. So the adventure continues.
Yeah, right. I know. See, I'm smiling because I just love that. I mean, it's so cool. I was just in the right spot at the right time and had a little bit of skill in some things that would maybe give you a little bit easier way to progress through those. But, when I was a rep, there was a big boom in the 90s. Gosh, we made a lot of money, working with neat companies. Patagonia was fun. Orvis was a fun company to work for. Scientific Angler was owned by 3M. So I had that. We'd go back there and get flown in a G3 jet to corporate retreats and have our meetings. It was just a very interesting and fun educational process. But there was that economic crisis of 2007, 2008 when everything crashed and, Cabela's was closing stores and fly shops were going out of business. And as a rep, I was going to visit my customers and they would say, hey, well, I got some orders to cancel. So I wasn't getting orders. I was canceling orders. And so I just saw the writing on the wall.
You were losing money working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's expensive being on the road, even then. So I just thought, man, I need to phase this out pretty soon. Plus, I'm getting a little burned out of Motel 6 and eating all by yourself all the time and driving, getting speeding tickets. So I knew Todd Moen as a videographer. Even just around his late high school or early college days, he was still shooting a funny little Super 8 camera, but his stuff was pretty good. This is a long time ago. Well, he moved to Bend, Oregon with his wife. And so I bumped into him. I thought, hey, these things are happening with me. What do you get? What are you doing? What do you want to do? He says, well, I just survived a plane crash in the Bahamas shooting for like an ESPN fishing show back in the day. I'd Fly Fishing the World and different things. I don't know the name of his show, but so he was a cameraman. He said, yeah, we overloaded the plane and it crashed and I'm looking for a new gig. I want to still do what I'm doing, but I need a new gig. And so we bounced around ideas. We'd go to this pub called McMinimum's, famous in Oregon. They have about 20 pubs. And we'd meet. We'd have our laptops and we'd punch in stuff and try to find out what's the next gig. And we had all these different ideas. And finally, we just settled on, look, you do video. I like stills. And we know all these other people that do it too. Let's do an online magazine because you have to have online for video. And paper magazines at that point were starting to slow down. They were getting the influence of what digital and the internet was going to do to the publishing business. And so we invented this Catch Magazine, which was our idea of doing sort of a coffee table book, the Journal of Fly Fishing Photography and Film, every 2 months. And we would highlight all these great photographers and all the people you see now in magazines. Some of them got their start in Catch Magazine, which it makes me feel really cool.
Right, sure.
When someone says, yeah, Brian, you published my first photo. I went, yeah, right on. And so, it became very, very popular. It was free. And so we had, I think, 280,000 subscribers. I mean, unheard of numbers in print, of course, because you click a button and it goes out to the whole world. And that was fine. But boy, still in that day and age, even the big companies, G. Loomis, Orvis, any company didn't have much of a budget for marketing and things were just tough, and we were a little ahead of our time, but the public loved it. And we were loving it too. It was a fun project. And eventually, when the ads were a little bit harder to come by, we just had to force it into a paid subscription thing. So then you go back to zero and then you see how it will build up from there. And it did okay. And it's still doing okay. But Todd's married. He's got 2 great kids. I'm a single guy. And so I'm thinking, Todd, I'll help you still, but I'm going to go find a new gig. And I'll still love to be a contributor, even in every issue. If you want it, that's fine. I'll help you whenever I can, but it's making enough money for you and your family. And, I just give you my half and I just want to help you. And I'm going to go do something else.
It's amazing how you just gravitate from one substantial subject to another. You have this little period, this little window, and all of a sudden you're jumping.
Yeah. And I didn't have a plan B.
Do you get impatient throughout your life at a certain point where you go say, I'm over this?
Yeah, I think I would as much as anyone else would. I think it's called burnout. Now, I wasn't necessarily burned out with catch because, we had, with those kinds of numbers, we had every lodge in the world say, hey, would you do a photo essay here? Or would you bring the cameras down and shoot video for us? And we'll pay your airfare, we'll put you up, and you do your thing. You need your content, but I sure need yours. And we made, like when Todd did the mousing video in Alaska, we went up there and, that thing has 1.5 million views.
But you left the whole thing.
Yeah.
You left
but I still like working with Todd, and we still
contribute.
Yeah, we just did 2 really good, fun videos in New Zealand. And they're on, Todd Moan, he has his own YouTube channel, but the Catch Magazine YouTube channel has all these videos on there. They're great. They're fun.
But now you're with 11 Expeditions, and what's your role at 11?
Yeah, so this is cool. Back in the day when I worked for Scott Rods as a rep, there was a guy named Moose Hofer who worked at the Telluride in Montrose office. We became really good friends because we did shows together and things, and he's a great angler, good guy, super fun guy. And then out of the blue, he calls me, and this is when I don't quite have a plan B for leaving Catch. I just want to do something different because if you're in publishing, whatever it is, you're going to be on your computer from 8 a.m, and I'm texting and emailing Todd at 10 p.m, and he's getting right back to me. So I know he's on his computer. It's just a lot of time, a lot of screen time. And then, of course, getting out and doing those trips are great, but that's 1 week. The rest of the month was just a lot of Photoshop and just graphic design and stuff. So I did get a little burnout on just that too much computer time. So Moose calls me up out of the blue and says, hey, I got some buddies. They got a little fly fishing and ski gig, and I'm doing some guiding for them. And we know you've been down to Chile a lot, so would you like to come with the owner and me and a couple of the guys, and we're going to go fish a lodge that's for sale, and we just want a good stick. And I went, well, good stick. That's cool. I'll do it. And so off we go, and we go to this lodge. We fish up and down. We do the dinners, and we're talking about, the resource here and all that. And apparently I did something that they liked, and probably 4 or 5 months later, I got a call to go to work for them as just sort of a liaison on the fishing side, even though I loved their ski side, because today, if you go on, 11experience.com, you'll see heli skiing in Chile and Iceland and ski lodges and chateaus in France and blah, blah, blah. It goes on. And Colorado, all over. They have Revelstoke, BC, heli skiing. Well, the fishing stuff is the same, a couple places in Iceland, 2 in New Zealand, Owen River Lodge and Cedar River Lodge are some of the best in the world, on and on and on. So I thought, this is a pretty cool gig. And so I was sort of their guy that had all this experience in places and also with people. So I could call Tom By at the Drake. I could call Ross Purnell at Fly Fisherman. I could get us into Grace Sporting Journal. Turns out all that stuff my mom said to do, just go have fun and a job will happen. If you're having fun, you'll find a job. And it turns out getting to know these people, because the marketing department, they're young, super bright. I mean, the whole company's young and super bright. But they didn't know all the people in the industry. Well, you get suppliers like Yeti and rods and reels and lines and flies. And that was just hey, Tom. Yeah, I know. Oh, you're coming through? Yeah, you can sleep on my couch. Sure. Hey, 11 would like to advertise and also maybe get a story in the Drake. Would you be interested? Oh, yeah, sure. Okay, let's talk by. It's that easy. Mm-hmm. Marketing department's like, Tom By.
It's a perfect, Ross. Perfect marriage.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, I love what they did. Still love what they do. And again, it's still kind of young. It keeps me young. I've had to learn some technical stuff that I never would have even wanted to, but it's the part of doing business, and it's different intercompany software that's kind of tricky at first, but once you get the hang of it, it's pretty fun. It's fun to learn. And so I just really enjoy the people I work with, and,
you found your ultimate job, man.
It's sort of my ultimate job.
This is the greatest job that you've been working for.
It might be the best job in the world if you like to fish.
And ski.
Yeah. Check this out. So we're doing this new program called Ski Runs and Sea Runs in Iceland. So you fly into Reykjavik in May. You get up to Deplar Farm Lodge, and you heli ski in the morning on beautiful corn snow, sometimes still powder, because it's 30 miles from the Arctic Circle. But you know how Iceland's one of the most beautiful places in the world, and you're skiing in those mountains, and it's 3,000 vertical per run. So you have leg burning, great skiing with these amazing guides. The A-Star helicopter, the best, safest helicopter ever made. And then you fly over the ridge and you land down by these fixed up Airstream trailers, which is a changing room, fire going. The ski guides change out for the fly fishing guides. And it's like a party atmosphere going on.
Sign me up.
Yeah, you've just had these amazing runs, one after another. Then you grab, a 10-foot 7 weight or 9.5-foot 7 weight, and you're swinging for sea run browns. Skiing, a little bit of party time around the bonfire, waders on.
How do we get involved?
Well, I'll tell you what, next year will be the first time it's open, and I'll sneak you in somehow.
I want to go.
Yeah.
You want to go?
Hell yeah.
Let's remember.
See if you let a snowboarder in there.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Brian,
this has been such a wonderful conversation and visit with you. Your spectrum is just immense. Is there anything that you'd like to make mention?
No, I got one thing. Before you give it to Brian. I want to hear about your Africa trip with Billy Pate.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because you cut a world record on 20-pound test.
Yep.
A 181?
187.
187, yeah.
I can't believe we forgot about that. Thank God
know,
I'm here on the podcast, right?
Well, yeah, this is a neat way because we're really circling full circle here because people say, oh, O'Keefe, you must be Irish or something. I go, well, yeah, I'm sure back in the day there were Irish when they came across and all that stuff, but I'm Pacific Northwestern, Northern Rockies. That's my people, So I say that because being in the tarpon world, you're sort of considered an outsider. If you're not from the Keys or at least close to, you're not really legitimate. But being fascinated by a fish or that group of fish, the Grand Slam type fish and snook and trevally, doesn't really matter where you live, but for credibility, you're better off being from Islamorada or something like that, or the Key West. So here I am. I've caught tarpon in 10 countries. I love fishing tarpon, all sizes. And I get a call from a magazine now defunct. It was Saltwater Fly Fishing or something like that. And they said, hey, Brian, we need a guy to take pictures and fish in Africa. And it's a science project. We're going to take the otolith bone out of the brain of a tarpon that has the growth rates and age of fish. And we're going to put it in liquid nitrogen, and we're going to take it all the way back to a university in South Carolina or somewhere. I really don't remember. This is quite a while ago. And it turns out a guy I knew, Pierre Affray, was going to be on the trip. And he's a big Keys guy from France, a vet in France. And I've stayed at his house in Paris and stuff. So we're pretty good friends. And then Billy Pate's going to be there. And I've met Billy Pate. I knew who he was and what he did and making the reels back in the day. And a guy named Tom from Texas who's got a lot of world records and state records, way over 200 pounds on standard rod and reel gear. And another guy from Louisiana had the Louisiana state record tarpon, which was like 215 or something, giant fish, migratory fish. I said, wow, this sounds really cool. And he said, the only thing is this doesn't pay, and you have to pay your way, airfare, the whole thing. Guides are just local villagers, but you just pay what everybody else pays. And I thought, well, it wasn't really all that bad, but this is seriously, if there is a trip of a lifetime, this would be hard to beat. Mm-hmm. I think you should have a trip of a lifetime about every 6 months. But, hey, this is really cool. Billy made me a custom reel with my name on it. And then we all kind of kicked around. There wasn't any any internet. We had to call people and stuff and say, what about these flies? These fish are huge. And they eat a lot of catfish and crabs, big crabs. And so we were kicking around ideas. It was really fun. Like all fishing trips, the process of information is really fun.
The anticipation is better than the trip, I think.
Sometimes, yeah. So we all fly. We meet in Paris. We overnight there. We have a big dinner. We go to a local fly shop. It's just a neat group. And then off we go. I think we went. I don't remember how we got there exactly, but it's Sierra Leone, Africa. Liberia is a neighbor, and it turns out there's a civil war going on. We get off the plane, the airport is just chaos. Sweaty men with machetes, but they're not hacking people. They're just doing, I don't know what they were doing. It was sort of like a riot. And so we get shuttled, but bunch of these like foreigner American guys get shuttled out of the riot into a van, and off we go. And that's Freetown. Very interesting place. They speak French. And then we eventually go through some roadblocks. We have to bribe these teenagers with guns, and stuff. They're making these homemade roadblocks and stuff. We get through all that. I'm going, this is pretty intense. Not your normal fishing trip, but whatever. And so we get on these boats, power boats, and we're going, this is fresh water. We're going to this bay where this big jungle river meets the ocean. And on the way, there's these little villages. No electricity, no generators, no nothing. This is really old Africa. Little huts and stuff. And there's a stick in the sand with a fresh human head on it, still dripping. And we drive by that in the boat. We're going, geez, that's pretty different. And so I ask, I ask a French guy, what was that all about? And he says, well, I'll ask the boat driver because he lives here. And then they converse a little bit. Then it goes from language to French to English. And he says, basically, he said that in your country, that would mean no trespassing. But, well, if they did that in Montana, I wouldn't have caught a lot of big browns, That was goosebumpy, crazy. So we finally get to this old boat that was trapped in the bay because it tried to get out of a storm. And with the storm surge, he got over the bar and he found protection, but he couldn't get out and he was waiting for a certain tide once a year, literally one day that he thought he could get out over the bar. Okay, giant river comes in. There's these big rolling tarpon all over the place. And Billy wanted to really be the first guy to catch a 200-pound tarpon on a fly. So he had the 16-pound world record at 187. No, 188. 188. Yep.
On 16.
Which is actually kind of good that I caught a 187, 1 pound smaller than him, just because he was so intent on being this 200-pound guy. So I didn't fly fish for the first, we were only fishing 4 days. So I didn't fly fish for the first 2 days because I didn't want to catch the big fish. And then, Billy had paid his dues.
He'd have your head on a stick.
Yeah. And I was fishing a 13-weight billfish rod with the fastest sinking line at the day was a teeny, like 600 or something. It sank like a rock. And everybody else was sort of doing the Florida thing with floating lines, looking for fish, but it's muddy water. There's crystal clear water from the ocean. It would meet the muddy water. And a lot of the tarpon patrolled in and out of that zone and they'd be rolling, but it was 30 feet deep. And Billy tried to go into some shallow, sandy areas, but the fish they didn't have anything to eat there. They had to eat the catfish and the crabs that were in the main channel. And I just looked at it finally and I said, well, I'm going to fish these last 2 days. And I jumped 18 tarpon, and some of them were just gigantic, but they want to do IGFA leaders, which is fine. I'll do what anybody wants to do. It's fine. Except the fish were so big, they'd have the fly on this side of their mouth, and on this side of the mouth, the knot was inside.
Yeah, they'd override the bite tippet into the
and
shock.
They would just get on your 20, and then 2 jumps. And I mean, these things were so huge. So the guys fishing standard rod and reel stuff from Texas and Louisiana, their largest tarpon was 242. And I was there to see it, and it got hauled in, and that was our biggest fish. So
was that the photograph of
them on the beach
with the AK-47?
Yeah. I got that guy with the.
That's an unbelievable photograph.
Yeah, the machine gun, and he was kind of a guard for us. Turns out there was pretty big. I mean, several 100,000 people died. It was pretty big civil war and civil unrest. And we could hear a little pop, 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 pop up in the mountains. And I saw this group of local type guys with shorts, a machete, and their eyes were just as red as red could be. And I thought, God, what is that all about? I finally found out that before they went out slicing, attacking villages and stuff, they would snort cocaine and gunpowder. And that would get their blood vessels in their eyes would break. They have these red eyes, and that's what jacked them up to go out and fight.
No shit.
Yeah, it's like, holy cow. 1 morning, I got up first because we were living on that little freighter boat, probably 150 feet long, little tramp steamer, they call it. And we had these row of lights up above over the dinner table. And someone forgot to turn out the lights one night. And so all night long, in an area that has no electricity, no lanterns, just fire and stuff, every bug in that jungle came to the boat attracted to those lights. And when I came up to that, it was that thick, a carpet, an inch thick of millions of bugs. And I was like, this was the creepiest thing. I'm barefoot. I'm like, oh God, this is unbelievable. Except one of the guides got there before me and he was picking out the best ones to eat. So it's a cultural experience, Yeah.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah. Like, how do you like your eggs? So a lot of interesting things were going on. So I fished the last 2 days and I lost a bunch of big fish, well over 200 pounds. And because I was fishing deep and nobody else was, I would cast up tide as far as I could or up current if we were closer into the river mouth and just stack slack and running line on top of it and maybe for a minute and a half or 2 minutes, I just let it sink. And everybody's done that that's fished any sort of jungle river or something. And then when it was down, you're fishing at a 45-degree angle down, you're stripping. And I was using a 11-inch sailfish fly with tandem hooks. And because the stuff they ate was big. They were eating catfish that the villagers caught. The villagers didn't want the big fish because they had these little dugout canoes. They just wanted those little catfish, and catfish is good. And so I'd hook these fish super down deep, and they would come up like a missile out of the submarine. And by the time they hit the water, they were going hit the surface. And they would do these spectacular jumps. If they were 120 pounds, which is sort of smallish, they would really get big air. And it was phenomenal to watch. But then eventually they would usually bite through. And so I don't know if it was my last fish or something, but I just sort of lucked out the way it was hooked. And I landed it. But it was a big female, 50 years old. And it jumped full 7 times and then a bunch of half jumps. And it was in 20 minutes. So,
and it's 50 years old because of the otolith study.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so that 242 that those guys caught, we kept the otolith out of that one. And then the smallest fish was 50 pounds. So we had all these different fish to.
How old was the 242?
Yeah. I don't remember, but I think it was a female around 70 years old, something like that. I don't know how old they live, what the potential of their age is, but that's pretty old, And so I remember mine was 50, but so we got that one, and Billy gave me a congratulations.
What was it like to hang that up on a scale and realize that it was a new world record?
Well, I think for some people they would be doing backflips, and for me, I always thought that world records should sort of honor the fish. I'm randomly casting into deep water. I don't know what I'm catching. So if I caught a tailing bonefish that was a world record, I'd be on cloud 9, or a tailing permit, or swinging on a stream that might have really big steelhead. Those species catching a world record would really be cool. But just to sort of be blind casting and randomly hooking bigger fish, that the average was almost a world record. So
right.
I didn't really, I was just the lucky guy on the end of it. It was cool. I think it gave the trip some credibility also, but it didn't matter to me. It did cause a little bit of a brouhaha in Florida, like, oh, this kid from Oregon caught a world record, blah, blah, blah. And I remember I got a call at 5-something in the morning, and it was, I don't know how they got my number. There's some guy in Florida. And he goes, hey, I want to tell you about your world record. I go, yeah, I know, but it's 5 in the morning. And he goes, no, it's not. It's 8. I go, it's 8 where you live, but it's 5 where I live. That's why these sorts of things happen. A lot of people trying to find out if there is some hocus pocus, and it's just a weird deal. And do you know that a fella made me a fiberglass mount of that fish that I didn't even really know, but he didn't like who had the world record before me. So he thought, well, good on you, Yeah. And so he made me a mount for free. And I'm living in a little house. What do you do? Practically a 7-foot fish, It's now in a fly shop in Bend. But I mean, just so many, one story leads into another because so much cool stuff happens when you're out there in that kind of crazy stuff. It's fun.
Yeah. With such a big life, what are you most proud of as we wrap this up?
I think friendships and the fact that, I'm from a very small family. We say our entire family can fit in a Mini Cooper, and it's really just 3 or 4 people. And we're the happiest little family in the world. And so I see a lot of people whose families disintegrate or get weird or funky. And my brother and I are still best friends. And I like that. And I just like having a super neat group of friends that I've met through the fishing world, yourselves included. And that you could name a country, like Costa Rica. I said, oh God, a friend of mine in Costa Rica, we talk every week, or it's islanders and people from all over the world. It's just fun having an interesting people who are quality people who have great skills. And success could be financial, but to me, most of my friends I call successful because they're living the dream, they're doing great stuff. Whether it's a guide who's providing great service and showing people water they'd never ever be able to see, that's fantastic. So all walks of life, great people.
Well, when I first met you, you're one of the most vivacious, energetic, happy people I've ever met. I think you might be everybody's best friend.
Yeah.
You really are like that.
No enemies. Everyone loves you.
There's like no ego. Hey, how are you? You want to cast in this casting competition or whatever? And you're always, doing the monitoring of a lot of great things, around these trade shows. And I really enjoyed our friendship. And thank you for
it goes both ways.
Sharing your life story with us.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. And I want you guys to keep doing the great work you're doing. And I just hope I didn't mess it up.
No, you did great.
Oh,
it's great to meet you, Brian.
Thank you. Yeah. Congratulations. Is it a son or a daughter?
Son.
The new son. That's so cool. 4 months ago?
4 months, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Brian.
So much. Thank you.
What I saw is just that story. What I saw is just a